I hadn't even stepped off the courthouse steps after signing the divorce papers when my phone buzzed. A message from my mother: "Don't bother coming back. There's no room for you in this house anymore." Rain poured down in heavy sheets. By the time I got home, my clothes were drenched, scattered across the porch. Next to them was a crumpled note. "Madison needs this room more." Divorce alone was painful enough, yet within a few short hours I lost the last place that felt like home. My mother didn't wait to face me. She sent that cold text as if issuing an eviction notice. My father was nowhere in sight, and Madison, my younger sister, had already moved her things into my old room before I even arrived. Everything had happened so fast it felt premeditated. Clothes thrown outside, suitcase unzipped, a note left behind like an official declaration that I no longer existed in this family. I had thought losing my husband was the end, but that moment revealed something far crueler. The people who shared my blood were the ones pushing me to the bottom. I stood in the rain a little longer, clutching that soggy note with the words, "Madison needs this room more." The paper bled ink, but the sentence burned clear inside me. My whole body trembled, not from cold, but from betrayal tightening around my chest. I pushed open the heavy wooden door. The house smelled the same: aged wood, faded carpet, family photos lined neatly on the wall, but the warmth I once felt here was gone. The silence inside was thick, complicit, as if the house itself sided with them. In the living room, my mother Eleanor sat upright on the sofa, a steaming cup of tea perfectly placed on the table. Her face was blank, her gaze steady and cold. My father Gregory stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes fixed outside as the rain soaked the trees. Madison peeked from the staircase, a faint smile on her lips, watching as if this were some kind of show. I set my suitcase down, my voice hoarse from the long day. "I'm home." Eleanor lifted her eyes from the teacup. Her tone was calm, rehearsed. "Home? For what, Roxanne? You already threw away the golden chance we gave you." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Her words cut cleanly, deliberate. "Daniel, do you have any idea how much this family invested in that marriage? And you walked away because you couldn't tolerate a little discomfort." Blood rushed to my face. I fought to keep my voice steady. "A little discomfort? You know exactly what I went through with him. I was losing myself, piece by piece. How can you call that a golden chance?" Eleanor laughed, short, brittle, and cold, like glass shattering. "You've always been selfish. Real strength is sacrifice. Madison understands that. You don't." I turned to my father, searching for a sign of disagreement. But Gregory stayed by the window, hands tightening and relaxing again, saying nothing. His silence hurt more than any of my mother's words. Madison descended the stairs, her blonde hair falling perfectly, her face lightly made up as if she were heading to a party, not watching her sister be cast out. She tilted her head, smiling sweetly. "Don't be mad at Mom. She means well. Daniel's a wonderful man." The way she said his name, the flicker in her eyes, stabbed through me. My suspicion wasn't paranoia. I clenched my fists to stop the trembling. I pulled my suitcase toward my old room, needing a moment to breathe. But when I opened the door, my heart dropped. Madison's clothes hung neatly in the closet. Her dresses covered the bed I used to sleep in, and her makeup lined the vanity. Every trace of me childhood photos, the books I'd cherished, was gone, as if I'd never existed. I turned back, my voice breaking. "Mom, this is my room." Eleanor appeared in the doorway, arms folded. "Not anymore, Roxanne. Madison and her family need it more." "You chose your path." I froze. My path? The only thing I chose was to escape a man who destroyed me. How is that wrong? Gregory finally turned around, though his eyes didn't meet mine. His voice was low, evasive. "Let it go. It's done." 4 simple words, it's done, but they strangled me. I looked at each of them. My mother's icy calm, Madison's quiet triumph, my father's cowardly silence. I wanted to ask how blood could turn this cold, but no words came out. Madison stepped closer, running her fingers over a red dress hanging in the closet. She looked at me and smiled, sickly sweet. "Beautiful, isn't it? This room suits me better." I inhaled deeply, forcing myself not to crumble. I knew if I cried now, if I begged, it would only prove what Eleanor already believed, that I was weak, undeserving. By that evening, I was gone. The rain hadn't stopped. I left with a single suitcase, the only thing still mine. The apartment I found was on the third floor of an old building near downtown. Nothing fancy, one small bedroom, a simple kitchen, and a window overlooking the parking lot, where wet cars glistened under dim yellow lights. Yet the quiet felt safe. No one there called me ungrateful. No one mentioned Daniel. No one told me to endure a little longer. On my first day, I tried to make the place feel like home. I stacked books on the shelf, hung a few dry clothes, and put on water for tea. But when I opened my phone to pay the rent, a message flashed across the screen. Transaction declined. Your account has been locked. I tried again. Then again. Same result. Every card, every savings account frozen. My hands went cold. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't broke either. The money should have been there. Why was it locked? I called the bank. A polite female voice answered, distant and professional. I'm sorry, Miss Prescott. Your account has been temporarily frozen, pending ownership verification. Verification? By whom? I'm afraid I can't disclose that. You may contact our legal department for further assistance. Ownership verification? My name had been on that account for over 10 years. No one but me could request a freeze, unless... A chilling thought hit me. I grabbed my phone and called Mark Spencer, the attorney who'd handled my divorce. Roxanne? His voice carried surprise. I was about to call you. I received a copy of a new financial record connected to you. What? According to the latest notarized documents, you're no longer listed as a beneficiary of Gregory and Eleanor Prescott's estate. I went numb. That's impossible. I'm still their legal daughter. I know, but this document was filed 3 days after your divorce. Someone updated the entire family trust and replaced your name with Madison's. The air thickened. My heartbeat roared in my ears. Who had the authority to do that? Only the property owners or their legal proxy. In this case, probably your father. I stood up, pacing the small apartment, searching for space to contain the fury rising inside me. But there was nowhere big enough for it. Can you verify the original copy for me? I'll do it. But you should prepare yourself, Roxanne. This change happened too fast, too smoothly, like it was planned in advance. I hung up and stared into the void. Mark Spencer's words kept echoing in my head. Planned in advance. Everything began to connect: the text from my mother, kicking me out, my father's averted gaze, Madison's strange smile, and now the financial records disappearing in 3 days. Too perfect. Too quick. It couldn't be coincidence. I sat down at the table, opened my laptop, and logged into the asset management system my father once used for the family business. The password no longer worked. I tried several times until the screen flashed. Account permanently locked. A memory flickered one night a month ago. Daniel, drunk and careless, had said, "You wouldn't understand, Roxy. Everything's already been decided." At the time, I thought he meant work. Now I wasn't sure. I pressed my hand against my forehead, forcing myself to stay calm. If my bank accounts were frozen, my cards disabled, and my name erased from the inheritance records, that meant I had been systematically erased from every financial trace of my family. Deliberately. Someone wanted me gone, not from the house, but from existence itself. A message alert chimed. I glanced at my phone. An unknown number had sent one line. "Don't try to come back. There's nothing left for you here." I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The city night was cloaked in gray mist, rain still falling lightly, neon signs flickering over slick pavement. I didn't know where I was heading, only that I needed to find something real to hold on to. I stopped in front of a small coffee shop on the corner, the one where my father used to meet business partners. A thought struck me. If the financial records were altered, there had to be a trail. My father had entrusted everything to his chief accountant, Mr. Hensley, who had worked for the family for more than 20 years. I opened my contacts and found his number. After a few rings, his hoarse voice came through. Miss Roxanne? It's been a long time since I heard your voice. I'm sorry for calling so late. I need to ask you something. Has my father's asset record been changed recently? Silence on the other end. Then, a sigh. I can't say much, but yes, there were changes. And I wasn't allowed to keep a copy of the originals. Not allowed? By who? My father? No. By Daniel. My heart stopped. Daniel? He brought a power of attorney signed by Mr. Gregory. Everything appeared legal, so we had to comply. I thanked him and ended the call, my hand trembling. The final piece had fallen into place. Daniel, my father, Madison, they were all on the same side. The divorce had never been the end. It was the beginning of an erasure. I sat silently in the dim apartment, yellow light spilling across the wooden floor, reflecting off the photograph in my hand. It was taken at one of Daniel's company galas 2 years ago. I was wearing a deep sapphire satin dress, my arm resting gently on his, my smile strained toward the camera. But what caught my eye wasn't me. It was a small detail in the corner. Madison, in a striking red dress, standing at a distance, yet Daniel's gaze was fixed exactly on her. Not on me, not on anyone else, on my sister. I remembered the night Daniel first came home to meet my family. My mother, Eleanor, had spent a week preparing new tablecloth, polished crystal vases, red roses lining the entryway. She told me to wear a cream-colored dress, modest and safe, she said, part of her strategy. I still recalled her exact words before Daniel arrived. Make him see you know how to maintain appearances. Men like Daniel don't need love, they need image. Back then, I thought she only wanted me to have a stable life. Now, looking back, I realized that was the night it all began, the moment I stopped being a daughter and became a tool for their ambitions. The dinner went perfectly. Daniel was seated in the place of honor. My father beamed as he chatted with family partners, and my mother's satisfaction was written all over her face. Only one moment unsettled me when Madison came down the stairs. Hair tied high, red dress glowing in a room full of neutrals. Daniel looked up. That look lingered for several seconds, long enough for me to notice. At the time, I told myself not to think too much. He was my fiancé, and my sister was a carefree girl who loved attention. But the more I remembered, the more foolish I felt. I unlocked my phone and opened the old photos stored in the cloud. Under the dim light, dozens of pictures appeared from those glittering parties. Daniel and I standing side by side, flawless smiles, shoulders touching, champagne glasses shimmering in the background. In nearly every photo, Madison was somewhere in the frame, closer to Daniel than I had ever realized. In some, she was leaning toward him, whispering something that made them both laugh, real, unforced laughter, the kind I hadn't seen from him in years. I zoomed in on one photo. Daniel's hand was on my back, but his eyes were on Madison. My chest tightened. Could it have started before my marriage even began to crack? I thought back to my father's birthday party, when Daniel drove me there in the new car he'd given me. The house was full. Family, friends, old business associates. My mother floated around, radiant, but kept whispering to me, "No more than 2 drinks, Roxanne. Don't talk about work. Let Daniel lead the conversation, understood?" I was a wind-up doll, performing as instructed. Madison, freshly graduated and bright-eyed, talked endlessly with Daniel about entrepreneurial passion. He was nearly 10 years older, but his laughter that night, deep and genuine, was unlike any laughter I'd ever shared with him. On the drive home, I asked, "Did you notice Madison talking to you the whole night?" He laughed. "She's a sweet kid. You should be proud to have such an outgoing sister." It had sounded harmless then. Now it made my skin crawl. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Look closer, Roxanne. Nothing was ever random." I froze. Someone was watching me, or worse, knew exactly what I was thinking. I opened the small box where I kept old keepsakes. Among faded papers, I found an envelope Daniel had once sent to my mother. His handwriting was unmistakable. The envelope was empty, except for a short note in the corner. "Finish before the 20th. I didn't understand what finish meant, but I remembered my divorce had been finalized on the 20th. If Daniel and my mother had been in contact, what else had they orchestrated? And Madison, when had she joined them? The image of Madison on the porch came back to me the day I left. Arms crossed, a faint smile on her lips, not pity, but triumph. I picked up the photo again. This time, it didn't hurt. Instead, a sharper, steadier feeling rose inside me. I didn't know where the truth would lead, but I knew this. If Daniel and Madison's affair had begun before my marriage fell apart, then I hadn't lost love. I'd lost my dignity. And dignity was something I would never let them trample again. I folded the photo and slipped it into my coat pocket. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air was still damp and cold. My mother's old words echoed in my mind. Perfect, Roxanne. You must always be perfect. I smiled, faintly tired, but resolute. Maybe it was time to learn how to be imperfect, to uncover the truth they tried so hard to bury. I started cleaning the apartment one gray morning. Rain from the night before still clung to the window ledge, and the air smelled of mildew and stale coffee. I only meant to tidy up, but somehow my hands reached for the old suitcase, the same one I had hastily packed the day I left home. It sat in the corner, coated with a thin layer of dust, fragile enough to crumble at a touch. I pulled it out and unlatched it. A familiar scent drifted out, the smell of the house I once called home, tinged with the faint bite of time. I began unpacking. A few clothes, a pair of shoes, a cracked picture frame. But when I lifted the fabric lining at the bottom, something felt uneven. I paused. The seam in one corner had loosened, as if someone had tampered with it. I slid my fingers through the gap and pulled gently. A thick, yellowed envelope emerged, creased and unmarked, except for a few handwritten words. Keep this for the right person. I tore it open and unfolded a stack of papers, folded into thirds. Heavy company-grade paper. The heading read, Share Transfer Agreement, Prescott Holdings and Daniel Carter. I skimmed quickly, numbers, percentages, signatures, until my eyes stopped on one line. Successor beneficiary, Madison Prescott. Not me. Not the woman who had been Daniel's legal wife. I set the papers down, my hands trembling. Fragments of memory came rushing back, my mother saying, Daniel is this family's best chance. The dinners where my father and Daniel poured each other wine, exchanging knowing glances. The times Madison would suddenly appear at my house without warning. Everything that once confused me now had an answer. I had been nothing but a bridge, a legal stepping stone for Daniel and my father to transfer assets without arousing suspicion, and the one who truly benefited from it all was my sister. A message alert pierced the silence. I picked up the phone. A text from an unknown number, short and sharp. Something shouldn't be dug too deep, Roxanne. I locked the screen, turned back to the table, and reopened the file. Every number, every signature now looked like a trail. I saw my father's signature, Daniel's, and a witness's, a name so familiar it froze me in place. Eleanor Prescott. My mother. I leaned back in the chair, drawing a deep breath to steady myself. Every member of the family was on this contract except me. They had cut me out of the very plan I was the centerpiece of. I remembered the day Daniel proposed. He knelt at my father's birthday party, under the lights and applause of the guests. My mother cried tears of emotion, while Madison stood beside her, smiling brightly, but in her eyes shimmered something I hadn't yet learned to name. Now I understood. They needed that. Marriage not for love, but for this contract. A legitimate husband, a dutiful daughter, all to keep up appearances. Once the transfer was complete, once the paperwork was done, my role ended. And they threw me out of the script. I laughed softly, the sound brittle in the small room. Not the laugh of someone defeated, but of someone who finally saw the play she'd been forced to perform. I slipped the file back into the envelope and stared at the words, "Keep this for the right person." Who had written that? If they truly wanted to hide it from me, why was this envelope in my suitcase the one place I had packed myself when leaving home? Some part of me believed someone in the house wasn't fully complicit. Maybe my father. Maybe a housekeeper. Or someone who had seen everything but couldn't speak up. I opened the drawer and took out the small box where I kept documents related to Daniel. I pieced everything together: the divorce papers, the frozen bank statements, and now this contract. The picture came into focus, and the clearer it got, the more it chilled me. This was a calculated plan, prepared for years. I looked out the window. On the glass, my reflection appeared blurred and distant. For an instant, I saw Madison's face overlapping mine, her gentle smile too perfectly false. I remembered the night before I signed the divorce papers, when Madison had texted me, "Sometimes letting go is the only way to live better, you know?" I had thought it was comfort. Now I knew it was a farewell. In the hallway, footsteps passed, heels tapping softly against the floor. I startled, glancing at the door. A thin sheet of paper slid under it, landing on the floor. I picked it up. No address, no signature. Just a few handwritten lines. "Don't trust anyone in the house. There's still more you haven't seen." The contract lay on the table, its black letters like knives cutting through my mind. Beneficiary: Madison Prescott. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, bright eyes, the gentle smile I had once believed harmless. Now I saw only a subtle, calculated coldness I'd been too naive to recognize. The next morning, Seattle was draped in a soft gray mist. I put on my coat, slipped the contract into my pocket, and drove to the shopping district where Madison worked. She ran a small boutique on the second floor, a luxury fashion shop Daniel had invested in for her years ago. Back then, I'd thought he helped my sister out of family affection. Now I knew it was a reward for her supporting role in their scheme. I parked, inhaled deeply before stepping out. The door opened with a soft chime of wind bells. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with fresh fabric filled the air. Madison stood behind the counter, blonde hair tied high, her fitted dress perfect as if she'd walked out of a magazine. She looked up, saw me, hesitated for a second, then quickly regained her composure. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You? I thought you'd left the city." I set my bag on the counter, my voice low. "We need to talk." Madison glanced around. The store was empty, only the hum of the air conditioner and soft background music. She crossed her arms, leaning lightly on the counter, her tone even. "Then talk. But make it quick. I have a supplier meeting." I pulled the contract from my pocket and set it on the counter. "Do you know what this is?" "Oh, Father's company papers. Why are you keeping those?" "You should know better than anyone. This is the share transfer agreement between Daniel and Father, naming you as the beneficiary." Her smile faltered for a moment, then returned. "What are you talking about? You must be mistaken." "Mistaken?" I clenched my fist to steady the shaking. "Do you think I wouldn't recognize Mother's signature? Father's? Daniel's?" She said nothing, then shrugged lightly. "So, what? You've always been too sensitive, always seeing conspiracies." From start to finish, I was the only one who didn't know I was being used. The entire marriage, every promise, all to legitimize this contract. Isn't that right, Madison? A faint smile crossed her lips. "You're smarter than I thought." Her voice was calm, almost weightless, hurting me more than any confession could. "Why?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice from breaking. "You already had everything, Mother, Father, their favor. Why take the only thing I had left?" Madison tilted her head, light streaming through the window, making her eyes shine like two icy stones. "Because you were never meant to be chosen, Roxanne. Mother knew it. Father knew it. Daniel knew it. You were standing in the wrong place." "What do you mean, never meant to be chosen?" She smiled, a real smile, but without an ounce of remorse. "Daniel never loved you. Mother forced him to marry you to avoid gossip, to save face for the family. But before you came along, he was already with me." A loud explosion went off in my head. I thought I'd misheard. "What?" I rasped. "Don't act so shocked. He and I did nothing wrong. Everything was part of Mother's plan." Madison exhaled softly, her tone even and terrifying. "Mother needed Daniel because Father's company was running out of cash. Daniel needed our family to expand his investments. But he couldn't marry me. I was too young. Too contract. So you became the perfect solution. I gripped the edge of the counter, cold sweat on my palms. And when everything was complete, what did you do? Madison smiled. I told Mother it was time to clean up. That your room at home was unnecessary, that you'd be a risk if you stayed around. And Mother listened. She always listens to me. You know that. My voice dropped, choked with anger. You were the one who convinced Mother to throw me out? Throw is such a harsh word. She shrugged. I helped Mother do what needed to be done. You have to understand. Everyone needs to know their place. I needed that room. Needed the company, needed Daniel. Her last words shattered my restraint. I stepped closer, my eyes cold. You think you can take everything without paying a price? Madison didn't back away, didn't blink. Are you threatening me? You have nothing, Roxanne. No assets, no family, no Daniel. Who will believe you? She was right for now. I had nothing. But that also meant I had nothing left to lose. Finally, I bent down, picked up the contract, folded it, and spoke softly, sharper than any blade. Thank you for telling the truth. Even late, I'm still grateful. Madison raised an eyebrow. What are you going to do with it? You'll find out soon enough. I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard Madison call out, her voice soft but clear enough for me to catch. Roxanne, don't make yourself even more pathetic. Once you're off the board, it's best not to come back. I drove straight to my father's office as dusk settled. The Seattle sky had turned the color of ash, and the streaks of rain sliding across the windshield seemed to stretch my anger even further. I'd heard enough lies from my mother, from Madison, from Daniel. Now there was only one person left who could give me the rest of the picture. My father, Gregory Prescott. His office sat in an old building downtown, the same one I used to visit with him as a child. When I was little, I admired him deeply, a calm, respected man whose name carried weight in the investment world. But stepping through that frosted glass door now, I no longer saw the father I once trusted. He was sitting behind his desk, bent over a file. His hair had grayed, but his movements were still deliberate, precise, as ever. When he looked up and saw me, he paused for a second before forcing a faint smile. You came without calling first, Roxanne? I stood at the doorway, my voice hoarse but steady. If I had called first, you probably wouldn't have let me in. He exhaled, gesturing for me to sit. I walked over, set my bag on the chair beside me, and met his eyes. I spoke with Madison. A flicker crossed his gaze hesitation, but he quickly masked it. Did you two argue again? You're always… No, father, not this time. I cut him off, my tone firm. I want the truth. All of it. About Daniel, about the contract, and about why my name was erased from every family asset document. Finally, he removed his glasses and placed them on the desk. It's not as simple as you think, Roxanne. Then make it simple. Tell me the truth. Gregory lowered his head, fingers interlacing tightly. Prescott Holdings ran out of capital 4 years ago. I kept it from everyone. The company was on the verge of bankruptcy, unfinished projects, investors pulling out. Daniel was the only one who offered help. And in exchange for that help, you handed over your daughter as collateral? He looked up, guilt clouding his eyes. Daniel didn't say it outright. At first, I believed he truly cared for you. Your mother thought the marriage would save the company, protect the family's reputation. And I didn't object. I leaned forward, not taking my eyes off him. So you knew. From the very beginning, you knew I was part of that bargain. Gregory didn't answer, but his silence said everything. I clenched my fists, forcing control into my voice. I lived in that marriage for 3 years, father. I endured dinners full of strangers, empty compliments, and Daniel disappearing for weeks under the excuse of business. Meanwhile, you and mother kept smiling, kept telling me to sacrifice for the family. And now you tell me it was all for the company? He ran a trembling hand over his face. I'm not proud of it. But when you're the one holding a family together, sometimes you have to choose the lesser of two evils. Prescott Holdings was your grandfather's legacy. If it had collapsed, I tightened my grip on the chair. Grandfather's legacy? Then tell me, why is my name no longer on his will? Gregory froze. clearly not expecting me to know. I saw fear flicker in his eyes, fear mixed with regret. "Who told you that?" he asked quietly. "Doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is the truth." He sighed, nodding slightly, as if he knew he couldn't hide it any longer. "Yes, there was an older will." I studied him. "An older will?" "Your grandfather wrote it before he passed, about 8 years ago. In it, he left the old house, part of the company's shares, and a trust fund, to you, not to your mother, not to Madison, only to you." "Then why?" "Because your mother hid it," he interrupted, his voice soft but steady. "Eleanor said that will no longer reflected reality." When I asked, she claimed she'd filed an updated version, one that redistributed everything according to the family's decision. I let out a shaky half-laugh, half-sob. Gregory looked away. I had no choice. The company was drowning in debt. Daniel was threatening to withdraw his funding without financial assurance. Your mother said the old will would only complicate things. I let her handle it. I stood up, my voice low but firm. "You call me a guarantee, a shield, a way to save the family. But did you ever think of me as a person? A living, breathing person, not a tool?" Gregory's eyes were red, his mouth opening as if to speak, but no words came. At last he shook his head slightly. "I know I failed, over you. But it's gone too far, Roxanne. If you bring that will back, you'll drag the entire family into ruin." I stared straight at him. "You talk as if I haven't already been dragged down. They've taken everything, my dignity, my assets, my marriage, and now you want me to stay quiet to protect their reputation?" He opened his mouth again but had no answer. My voice lowered, slow and deliberate, every word cutting through the air. "I didn't come here for apologies. I came for the truth. And you've given it. Now I'll decide what to do with it." Gregory looked at me for a long moment, then reached into his drawer and pulled out a small, dark brown envelope, its edges worn with time. He placed it on the desk and slid it toward me. "This is a copy of your grandfather's original will. I kept it, in case you ever needed it." I stared at it in silence for several seconds. My hand trembled slightly as I touched it. "How long have you kept this?" "Since the day he died. I didn't have the courage to give it to anyone else." I gripped the envelope, feeling the lingering warmth of his hand on it. "If you truly want to make things right, say nothing more. Let me do what I must." Gregory lowered his head, his voice hoarse. "Don't let hatred consume you, Roxanne." I turned and walked out of the office. The rain hadn't stopped, and the gray sky poured down everything left of a family rotted from within. Inside my coat pocket, the old envelope lay still light in weight, but heavy with a truth buried for years. I returned to my grandfather's old house on a rainy morning. The house stood on a hillside, where the oak trees glowed warm brown no matter the season. The iron gate was rusted, but the brass plaque reading the Prescott Estate still gleamed, as if time had never passed. It had once been my home, the place I hid behind my grandfather when Mother scolded me, the place where he sat, reading the paper while I doodled beside him in my old sketchbook. After he died, Mother locked the house, claiming it was to preserve the family's assets. But no one had come back since. Everything inside was buried in dust, like my own memories deliberately forgotten. I stepped in. The scent of old wood and damp paper filled the air, familiar, yet aching. Each step made the floorboards creak, as if protesting my return. Light filtered through the fogged windows, falling on family portraits lining the walls. My grandfather, my father, my mother, Madison, and me, the little girl standing at the edge, smiling awkwardly. Even in memory, I was never truly in the center. I went straight to the upstairs storage room. It had once been my grandfather's small library filled with ledgers, contracts, and Prescott Holdings records. He had been the only one in our family not driven by greed. He used to tell me, "Roxanne, what's precious isn't money, but fairness. Never let anyone rewrite your story." I hadn't understood then. Now, every word rang crystal clear. I opened the file cabinet, hands shaking as I flipped through each drawer. stacks of papers, contracts from the 1980s, yellowed envelopes all neatly organized alphabetically. I searched for wills divided by legal records. The drawer was locked. I looked around and found the old key hanging on a wooden hook, the same one he used for every room. I inserted it, turned it gently. A dry click echoed through the air, yet to me it sounded like a door opening to the past. Inside were 4 folders. 3 of them were labeled, "Updated," by Eleanor Prescott. The last one stuck out slightly, unlabeled except for a handwritten note in brown ink. "Original, 2015. I picked it up. My heart pounded. On the first page, in crisp, faded letters, it read, "The last will and testament of Mr. George Prescott." The next line took my breath away. "I, George Prescott, leave all assets under my ownership, including the Prescott estate, the Western land, and 35% of Prescott holdings to my granddaughter, Roxanne Prescott." I sank into the chair, the paper trembling in my hands. Every word, every comma carved itself into my memory. Not Madison, not father, not mother, me. I turned the next pages and saw witness signatures and an official notarization. Nothing was altered, nothing revoked. So why had it been hidden? On the back was a small brown note, hastily written, "Do not disclose this until the girl turns 30. I froze. When he died, I was 27. The truth spread slowly through my mind, like ink bleeding across paper. They hadn't waited. They'd buried this will to keep the estate for themselves, claiming I was too immature, unfit to manage. And in the meantime, they replaced me with Madison, the one my mother always called, the perfect face of the family. I set the document down, inhaling deeply to steady the trembling in my chest. The light from the window touched my grandfather's portrait on the desk. I looked at him, feeling as if he were still there, watching me, smiling gently. "Grandpa, what did they do to everything you left me?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "They turned it into a bargain." I stood and searched the drawers under the desk. There, I found another envelope thinner, labeled Eleanor, copy. I pulled it out and skimmed the contents. It was a letter addressed to my mother from the law firm after his funeral. The first line made my blood run cold. "Per your request, Mr. George Prescott's previous will shall remain archived, and a revised version will be submitted to the court next week." There was no signature from my grandfather, only my mother's. I clenched the paper, my breath quickening. So that was it. They hadn't hidden the will, they'd fabricated the entire revision process, turning what was legally mine into Madison's, legitimized through documents Daniel helped arrange. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, warning of a coming storm. I looked around the room, the once sacred place of memory now thick with damp air and forgotten paper. As I folded the documents, a photo slipped out from between the pages. It was taken in the garden. Me, my grandfather, and Madison. I was sitting on his lap, while Madison stood beside us, clutching Mother's gold bracelet. My grandfather's gaze was fixed on me, warm, proud, and kind. It was a look I had never seen from anyone else in my family. I lifted the photo closer to the light and saw faint handwriting on the back. His handwriting, "All that I have built will return to where it truly belongs." I gathered everything, sealed it carefully in a moisture-proof pouch, and locked the cabinet. As I stepped out, I turned for one last look. The room, once filled with his presence, now felt sacred in its silence. Maybe he had known this would happen. Maybe he had understood that one day, I would have to find the truth on my own. I took out my phone, staring at the familiar number on the screen, the family's law office. I drew a long breath and pressed call. The secretary's polite, mechanical voice answered, "Good afternoon, Miss Prescott. How may I assist you?" "I need to see Mr. Miles, today. Tell him I've found what they hid." Later that afternoon, I sat in my small apartment, the pale light of dusk spilling across my desk in a cold, golden hue. In front of me lay my grandfather's will, the undeniable proof of my family's deception. But I knew one document wouldn't be enough. They were rich, powerful, and fluent in the gray areas of legality. If I wanted to reclaim what was mine, I had to do what they'd never expect: prepare carefully and strike where they were weakest, their belief that I would always be powerless. I picked up my phone and dialed Mark Spencer, a lawyer I'd worked with on a project years ago. Mark Spencer wasn't smart. He had something I needed most: the instinct of someone who'd seen families destroy each other over money. Roxanne Prescott? His voice carried surprise. It's me. Mark Spencer, I need your help. Help? What did you get yourself into? I can't explain over the phone, but it involves Prescott Holdings, my grandfather's will, and Daniel. I heard him exhale sharply before answering. Where are you? I'm coming over. 2 hours later, Mark Spencer was in my apartment. You're certain these documents were never made public? Positive, I said. And I have proof my mother replaced this with a fake version. The family's old attorney helped her do it. Mark Spencer raised an eyebrow. Then, this isn't a property dispute. It's organized legal fraud. I nodded. And I want to expose them. All of them. Mark Spencer leaned back, thoughtful. Then we'll need someone who understands how they cover their tracks. I know a private investigator, Alex Turner. He's worked on major forgery cases for real estate firms. If anyone can uncover the evidence, it's him. He called right then, the conversation brief. Within an hour, Alex arrived. He looked about 40, tall and lean, streaks of gray in his hair, eyes sharp like a man who'd seen too much deceit. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. What do you have? He asked. I handed him everything: the will, the transfer contracts, and copies of the frozen bank statements I'd saved back when I was still Daniel's wife. Alex studied each page, jotting quick notes before looking up. This isn't amateur work. Someone cleaned the trail well. The transfer documents share the same ink type, printer model, even electronic signature designed to look legitimate. But if you give me time, I'll find the cracks. How long will that take? I asked. 3 days for preliminary data. And I'll need access to Daniel's old devices. Daniel's phone. I remembered it. After the divorce, he'd left behind an old phone. I'd never touched it, thinking he'd replaced it long ago. It was still buried in the donation box. I might have what you need, I said quietly. That night, Alex and I sat at the table, surrounded by papers under the warm glow of a single lamp. I pulled out the old phone, charged it, and waited for it to power on. The screen lit up with the tech company's logo, followed by the passcode prompt. Alex glanced at me. You know the password? Daniel was never good at hiding things. His birthday. I entered the digits. The phone unlocked. Hundreds of photos, messages, and emails filled the screen. Alex quickly connected it to his laptop, extracting the data. We'll look for anything tied to Madison or the company. I stared at the screen. Among hundreds of images from business trips and lavish parties, one album name caught my eye: New York 2021. I opened it. The first photo showed Daniel on a hotel balcony, wineglass in hand, the Manhattan skyline behind him. The second made my stomach drop. Madison. She stood close beside him, her hand on his chest, eyes locked on his like they were the only two people in the world. The third, they were kissing. Not by accident, but with familiarity. My hands trembled. Alex stopped scrolling, his eyes softening. Roxanne. Don't, I whispered, staring at the screen. The next images showed them walking, dining, attending a company event, dates stamped 2 years earlier, when Daniel and I were still married. In my mind, every piece fell into place. Daniel's business trips, Madison's surprise visits, those fleeting looks I'd tried to ignore. It had all been right in front of me. I hadn't wanted to see it. Mark Spencer stood and placed a hand on my shoulder. Roxanne, this is critical evidence. Not adultery, it proves Daniel and Madison had a relationship before the contracts were signed. That makes every deal between them and your family invalid. Alex nodded. I'll back up everything, but you need to stay calm. If they find out you have this, they'll come hard. I drew a deep breath, forcing down the storm inside me. Calm? They've taken everything. Alex, my dignity, my fortune, my life. But this time, I won't let them make a fool of me again. That night, I wore a simple black dress, formal enough not to seem defiant, discreet enough to hide the fact I was armed with proof. The air was cold, wind rustling through the trees, streetlights stretching long shadows on the driveway. When I arrived, the dining room lights glowed warm, candles flickered, and the scent of roast and perfume lingered in the air, another perfect family dinner for appearances. The door opened. Mother stood there, polished and composed, her calm smile masking calculation. Behind her was Madison, elegant, radiant, with the smug glow of a victor. Father sat at the head of the table, hands clasped like a judge who'd already reached a verdict. Daniel came last, slightly late, eyes glacial. They'd staged it carefully. "We're a family, we must stay civil," Eleanor said as I stepped in, her tone dripping with practiced warmth. The greetings were hollow, words as thin as paper. I set my purse beside the chair, scanning their faces, waiting for a flicker of guilt, a crack in their act. Nothing, too calm. When the appetizers were served, I spoke evenly. "Thank you for inviting me, Mother." Eleanor smiled, though her eyes stayed flat. "We needed to talk, Roxanne. We've all tried to make peace." I calmly reached into my bag and placed a small envelope on the table, right between the plates, one they would recognize instantly. The handwriting was messy, the ink smudged. "Madison needs this room more." The room fell dead silent. It was as if someone had dropped a stone into the center of the table. Murmurs followed, low, frantic, muffled, but impossible to contain. I lifted the envelope slowly, letting them see each word. "It started here." Mother gave a brittle laugh. "Roxanne, it's only a note. Don't make a scene." A single sentence buried my room, buried my inheritance, and buried 3 years of my life with a man who never loved me. I emphasized each word before setting a thick stack of papers on the table. Mark Spencer and Alex weren't in the dining room. I had arranged everything so they could send files, audio, and video securely to my device. I opened my small laptop, connected it, and cast the images onto the TV screen on the wall. The first image appeared, the photo from the New York trip, Madison and Daniel kissing on a hotel balcony. The next was the share transfer contract signed by my father and Daniel, clearly naming the beneficiary, Madison Prescott. Then came my grandfather's will, the signatures, the notarized seal, and a letter confirming that my mother had submitted a revised version. The glow of the screen washed over their faces, reflecting shock, shame, and then raw fury. Daniel jumped to his feet as if shocked by an electric current. Madison's face went pale. Her smile faltered completely. Eleanor shrank back, like a child caught red-handed. Gregory kept his head down, hands trembling. I played the next recording, my mother's voice, speaking to the family lawyer after my grandfather's funeral, cold and commanding, instructing him to keep the will undisclosed. Her voice filled the room, unaware that silence between her words betrayed everything. I let the recording play to the end, the faint sound of her chuckling as she said, "Everything will be fine." Madison tried to interject, her voice shaking. "Roxanne, you need to calm down. We can handle this privately." "Privately?" I repeated, letting the 10-word hang heavy. "Was it private when you hid my grandfather's will? Was it private when you and Daniel signed papers that left me in this mess?" Daniel stepped forward, his eyes bloodshot, his tone sharp. "You have no right to expose this. We have attorneys. This is a legal matter, not a performance." I looked straight at him, my voice calm but cutting. "Exactly. That's why I brought it here. I want everything in the light, because only in the light can guilt be seen." Gregory finally lifted his head. He said little, but every line on his face told a story: regret, shame, and a trace of pleading. His hand clenched into a fist, veins raised. "Roxanne, you know I did it for the company. I had no other choice." His voice fell into a pit. "For the company?" I echoed, disbelief sharp in my tone. "And for the company, you sold your own daughter?" Eleanor shot to her feet, face flushed, desperate to seize control. "None of us thought what we did was perfect." But your father and I had to make hard choices to keep Prescott Holdings alive. Roxanne, you left Daniel, you brought this on yourself. Her words sliced through the air like glass, but I didn't flinch. I clicked on another file. This time an email appeared, Daniel's message to an address labeled MP, with an invitation to meet at a New York hotel, complete with timestamp and the attached photo of him with Madison. Madison froze. The color drained from her face, green, then red, then white, like each mask she wore was being stripped away. Do you have anything to say, Madison? My voice was cold, forcing her to face it. Madison broke first. She collapsed into her chair, pale and trembling, hands locked together as if holding on to control. You don't understand, Roxanne, her voice cracked. Mother made me do it. I didn't have a choice. Eleanor turned sharply, her eyes like blades. Don't you dare blame me. You're the one who wanted everything. You wanted Daniel, you wanted the Prescott name, you wanted to replace your sister. Her scream shook the room. Madison lifted her head, tears streaming but eyes burning with defiance. I did it for you, Mother. Did you forget? You told me to keep Daniel at any cost because if he pulled his funding, the company would collapse. I only did what you asked. The air shattered. I stood watching them tear into each other, not with anger now, but with a hollow, merciless emptiness. The people who once united to destroy me were now devouring one another to survive. Eleanor trembled, stepping toward Madison, her voice breaking under panic. I did this to save this family, to save your father from bankruptcy, to protect the Prescott name. And you've exposed everything! Madison stood abruptly, her tears mixing with her gasps. This family died long ago, Mother, the day you turned it into a transaction. Eleanor raised her hand, but for the first time, Madison didn't flinch. Her hand froze midair, shaking, then lowered slowly. She stared at her daughter, realizing that the girl before her was no longer the golden child but a fragment of her own ruin. Gregory remained at the head of the table, hand over his forehead, eyes hollow. I searched his face for remorse, but all I saw was exhaustion. You're not going to say anything? I asked quietly but firmly. He lifted his head, his eyes dull and weary, struggling for words before shaking it. Nothing I say will change this, Roxanne. It's beyond me now. Daniel sat across from me, eyes hard as stone. He hadn't spoken since the start, scanning the room like a man calculating an escape route. When I turned to face him, his expression shifted, not the man who once claimed to love me, but a stranger stripped of all disguise. I reached for the nearest file, pulled out the forged contract with his signature, and placed it in front of him. Would you like to explain this, Daniel? Or the part where you funneled company funds into Madison's personal account under the label consulting fees? You're fabricating this. Fabricating? I let out a dry laugh, empty of emotion. These are original bank records. I don't need to fabricate anything, Daniel. Every page is verified. Mark Spencer had prepared everything carefully. Each piece of evidence backed up, authenticated, and legal. I wasn't there to scream, I was there to end the performance they had written in cold blood. Madison buried her head in her hands, tears streaking down her face, mumbling. He promised me. He said it would be okay. He said he'd protect me. Daniel turned sharply, barking. Shut up. Madison! You don't know what you're saying. But she didn't stop. Her sobs broke through the chaos. You lied. Even before she divorced you, you were with me. You said she was weak, useless, that I deserved everything. And now? You're leaving me too? Eleanor screamed, her voice raw. Enough! She came here to humiliate us. Roxanne, what more do you want? You have evidence, lawyers, the court. Do you want to destroy this family? This family? I repeated, my voice cutting through hers. What family, Mother? The one that threw me out in the rain with a note that said, Madison needs this room more? Or the family that used me as collateral to legitimize their theft? Eleanor staggered back, struck by her own words reflected at her. Gregory murmured, voice barely a whisper. Eleanor, stop. She turned on him, wild-eyed. You be quiet. You let this happen. their shouting tangled and fractured. Daniel stormed out, shooting me a look filled with hatred. Madison sank to the floor, face buried in her hands, hair undone. Eleanor slumped in her chair, muttering incoherently through her heavy breaths. I stood in that room, the same room that once held countless family dinners, fake toasts, and smiles built on lies. Now, every mask had fallen. I gathered the documents one by one, slowly and neatly, not out of triumph but because I refused to let them be dirtied any further. News broke 2 days later. That morning, when I opened my window, a chill from the end of the season drifted in, and the newspaper lay neatly on the doorstep. The front page headline read, "Businessman Daniel Carter under investigation for financial fraud, linked to Prescott Holdings." On the day of evidence submission, Mark Spencer and I arrived at the county courthouse earlier than scheduled. Reporters were already crowding outside, cameras flashing with every step we took. I didn't look around, walked through the barrage of questions. "Miss Prescott, can you confirm you were the one who submitted the documents? Is it true your family falsified your grandfather's will? Do you know Daniel Carter may face criminal charges?" Mark Spencer gently touched my shoulder, signaling me not to answer. Everything now had to follow the process, no emotion, no mistakes. Inside, the air was cold and formal. The court accepted all evidence: the forged contracts, the original notarized will, the bank statements, and the recording of Eleanor's voice. The files stacked nearly the width of my hand. The judge skimmed through the papers, then looked up, eyes sharp and steady. "If what Miss Prescott has submitted is true, this is no longer a civil dispute. This is organized asset fraud." Mark Spencer nodded, calm but firm. "We trust the court will do what's right." In the days that followed, the media did the rest. They uncovered old shareholder contracts, Daniel's donations to company funds, and secret transactions between Madison and investors. Layer by layer, their lies unraveled before the public. Madison became tabloid fodder. Photos of her leaving court with swollen eyes and a bruised expression flooded every platform. Praise turned to mockery. Those who once circled her vanished in silence. A reporter asked me during a brief press conference, "Do you hate your sister?" "No. I want everything to return to its rightful place." That quote made the evening headlines. People called me strong. But real strength didn't come from standing before cameras, it came from facing those who once made me afraid. Daniel was different. He fought back, hiring his own lawyers, denying every charge. But when his bank accounts were frozen, his office computers seized, and investigators uncovered the internal transfers, everything collapsed. The day the police searched his office, I wasn't there. I only received a short text from Mark Spencer. They found the external drive, all the transfer data. Eleanor lost more than anyone. From a woman who once controlled everything, the company, the family, the reputation, she had now become a name tied to the phrase, abuse of inheritance. The shareholders unanimously demanded that she step down from the board of directors. Newspapers published photos of her leaving the Prescott Holdings headquarters in a worn-out coat, hair disheveled, stripped of her usual pride. I heard the news from Alex, the private investigator, when he sent the final update. "The Prescott estate has been legally confirmed under your ownership. They have no legal grounds left to appeal." I froze. The house, the one I had been thrown out of, my suitcase landing in the rain, now belonged to me. Not by schemes, but by justice. That afternoon I drove to the house. The iron gate was the same, but the lock had been changed. I walked along the stone path covered in dry leaves, the same path where Madison used to run around, where my grandfather and I planted an oak sapling when I was 10. Now the tree had grown tall, shading half the garden. Inside, the house still carried the scent of old wood, but it felt brighter, more open. The picture frames once taken down had been restored to their places. Passing through the living room, I saw my grandfather's photo back on the shelf. Alex said it was found in the storage room of the law office during inventory. Someone had tried to hide it, but now it was back where it belonged. I sat on the leather chair by the window, the curtain gently moving in the breeze. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass, scattering warm golden patches across the floor. Everything was quiet, only the wind and the birds outside. The phone rang. It was Mark Spencer. His voice was calm but carried a quiet meaning. All procedures are complete. The court has officially declared you the sole legal heir of George Prescott. I think he'd be proud of you. I smiled faintly, my eyes stinging. He'd probably tell me not to be foolish enough to trust family again. Mark Spencer chuckled softly. Or he'd say you did exactly what he taught you to do. We stayed silent for a few seconds before he ended the call. I leaned back in the chair, gazing outside. The sun was setting, the sky fading into deep orange. Memories came rushing back, laughter, arguments, the nights I cried in the very room that was now mine again. I walked upstairs. The old door creaked open. The scent of wood and old paint blended together, and I noticed the curtains had been replaced. I approached the window and looked out into the yard. The oak leaves rustled gently in the breeze. In the fading light, the house no longer felt haunted. It was breathing again after years of being locked away. And I, the woman once thrown out into the rain, had returned not for revenge, but to reclaim my place quietly, lawfully, and with proof. Beyond the gates, I could see reporters' cars parked, their cameras flashing non-stop. I knew the headlines would read, "The stunning turnaround of Roxanne Prescott." But to me, this wasn't a turnaround. It was justice finally being heard. Every family story walks a fine line between love and hurt. For me, the most painful part wasn't the betrayal, it was realizing that some people you call family would sacrifice you to protect their perfect image. But from that wreckage, I learned something. Justice doesn't always need to scream. Sometimes it only needs persistence and belief in yourself. And what about you? If you were in my place, would you have the courage to stand up, face them, and reclaim what's rightfully yours? I'd love to hear your thoughts about trust, about family, and about the line between forgiveness and letting go. Share your story in the comments. Someone out there might need to hear it to find their own strength again. And if you enjoy emotional journeys like this, real, relatable stories where justice and humanity intertwine, follow the channel so you won't miss the next one. Each week, we'll listen, reflect, and maybe find a piece of ourselves in these stories.